All right, here we go. Continuing through this top 100 list and starting at number 55. Tommy Troy, shortstop, could end up being a second baseman, maybe third. We'll see with the Arizona Diamondbacks. But for now, he's going to get every shot at short. And you know what? He might have the athleticism to stick there. But the reason why he is the number 55 prospect for us is and the hit tool has always been the calling card for Tommy Troy. And at Stanford, that's what really stood out on the Cape. That's what really stood out. He was one of those guys that, again, I was very curious to see how it would look when he's swinging wood. And if anything, he was hitting the ball harder once he made that transition to pro ball. And that was really impressive to me. All of a sudden, those EVs are pretty impressive. He's starting to pop some, I think is high or even maybe sometimes higher than what he was doing with metal, which was pretty absurd. He could get a little aggressive at times, and I think he was just trying to do a little bit too much in his pro debut. But when you blend the feel to hit, you blend the power that we saw, small sample, but in those 27 games or something like that, in a 90th percentile over 105, pummeling fastballs. He's going to need to make some adjustments to stay on sliders. Another guy that can just get spinny and it pulls him off of sliders. But assuming that he's able to improve that, his ability to punish fastballs, his speed, and also just the overall feel to hit, I just really like what we saw from Tommy Troy, both at Stanford and then how he continued that momentum into his pro debut. I think we could see a big year from the 22-year-old.
So do you think the punch outs came from trying to do too much? And again, limited sample, smaller sample, but in 23 games, he ran about a 26% K rate. He struck out 26 times in 99 plate appearances. So part of me is thinking it was, hey, you get into pro ball jitters and like you're saying, trying to do too much, extending the zone, running into some issues. And, these are also the best pitchers that he's ever seen. He went right to high A from 4 games and 16 plate appearances at the complex. So I feel like when he settles in, that K rate is going to dip well under 20. He doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to K at league average rates.
No, and I really do think it was trying to do too much because you look at what he did in college. He did swing a decent amount for a guy that is as powerful or, just was as feared as he was. I know he wasn't like a top power bat, but he could pretty much put you away pretty
He was
quickly.
too good to not be feared. Yeah.
Yes, and he slugged enough. And at the same time, he was still, swinging a fair amount because he could get to everything. In terms of like fastballs inside the zone during his collegiate season, he was posting some of the best in-zone contact rates in the entire nation. It was like 96, 97% on fastballs. So, when you're doing that, it's pretty easy to keep swinging and keep swinging because you feel like nobody can really get anything by you. In his professional stint, it was more the same with the fastball. He ran his zone contact rate over 90% on the fastball. But again, he was just swinging more. And I think he just hasn't been used to, hey, actually, I might not be able to hit as many of the pitches that are coming my way as I could in college. So I think as he reins in the swing rate a little bit, and then just also improves the path thing that we're talking about with the sliders specifically, I think it's all going to really come together for him. But when you can do what he does to fastballs, when you have the ability to elevate that he has continued to get better at, and he drives the ball to all fields, I really think it's just, again, staying on this. And he's shown the ability to drive the ball to all fields with the fastball. It's just staying on those hard sliders and refining the approach a little bit. Tommy Troy could be darn good. I guess the one thing that we got to monitor, and I think would really help his stock overall, is that defense at short. But I think he has a chance to at least be passable there as he continues to get more reps and improve. And it seems like the D-backs want to give him every chance there. If not, he'll be a really good defender at second base, or could potentially get by at third, where the bat would be, I think, impactful enough.
I can get behind that. We now enter the proximity band, which is what I'm calling it. All these guys are either big leaguers or they should be in the big leagues.
Well, Joey Ortiz is I think a perfect example of that, and I'm glad you led us into that because Milwaukee Brewers, one of their newest prospects, and they got a great piece here, in that DL Hall deal, or along with DL Hall in that Corbin Burns trade. Obviously, you're never going to get
the DL Hall deal. It was the Ortiz Hall deal.
The Ortiz Hall deal for that guy that also is pretty good at pitching. But, along with DL Hall coming over, just a couple really exciting players, a little bit older. So, that makes it, I think, a little bit more of a situation where he gets overlooked. And I think people might be a little bit less patient with him in his big league debut. Mm-hmm. Already picked up, or not big league debut, I guess, but that kind of was with the Orioles, though. I felt like in that big league debut, people were pretty impatient. I think it's going to be kind of more of the same in his Brewers debut. Picked up the first hit, but then hitless in his last couple games. They're playing him at third and second, which is interesting because my thing with Joey Ortiz is, look, I know he hits the ball hard. He makes a lot of contacts, but he puts it on the ground a lot. He's not going to slug a ton. And there might be some frustration here and there offensively because he's aggressive. So he makes a lot of contact and he hits it hard, but he's aggressive. So there's some volatility to the offense. Ultimately, I think it settles in where he's at least an average big league bat, maybe slightly better than that because of his field of hit and the impact. But when you're playing him at third and second, I don't know if you're getting the full value of Joey Ortiz. I understand they have Willy Adames and they're going to figure things out a little bit later, maybe in that whole regard with one more year of control. But for Joey Ortiz to be the most valuable version of himself, I think that's picking it at a really high level at shortstop. That said, he could play an elite third base and give them plenty of value there. It's just in a long-term perspective, it puts a lot more pressure on the bat where I think an everyday shortstop with great defensive ability and average offense, I mean, that's a multi-win player, and I think that's what Joey Ortiz can be, rather than a guy that's kind of roaming around the infield.
To a way less notable degree, this is kind of what was happening with Bobby Witt Jr. his rookie year. Bobby Witt was ticking down in terms of value because he was at third one day, then he was at short the other. Ortiz is displaced because there's a vet in his final year of arbitration at shortstop, even though he's the better option defensively. And if they actually wanted to run out their best possible defensive alignment, it would probably be Joey Ortiz at short and Adames at third, but that's not how baseball and seniority in general works.
Nope.
This is a 1-year fix. And next year, Joey Ortiz is likely going to be the everyday shortstop for the Milwaukee Brewers.
Yep.
I think you have to look at Joey Ortiz's situation beyond the scope of Willy Adames, because Adames is not going to be back. And if he is back, I bet you they tell him he's going to have to make the move to third base.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of the middle infield tandem of Joey Ortiz and Bryce Terang. By the way, Terang looks great to open the year.
Thank goodness. I was about to look like a bozo if after all the gas we gave him after the swing adjustments, he just fully, flops back-to-back years. But no, I think it's a great point because Terang can also really pick it too. And that's why I think it's clear that Adames is probably on his way out. They also have Eric Brown Jr., who can play a pretty good shortstop and should be coming up, in the next year or two if he can stay healthy and can swing it. And so you have all this middle infield depth now that's starting to kind of come up or is already up there. And a team that doesn't like to spend a ton of money. It seems like they're just going to give it their best shot because Adames is a great player and an established stud. And he gives them the best chance of winning, being in the lineup every day. And then, if it's not happening this year, they move him at the deadline. Ortiz gets an opportunity to maybe slide over there at the end of this season. And then, like you mentioned, I think he's the guy starting next year. And at least now he's still getting at reps offensively, which you want to see that bat continue to develop because at the end of the day, if you're going to be an everyday shortstop, you got to hit. And we know he's capable of it. He hits the ball hard, but the approach needs to get better, which I think it will continue to as he gets the reps. And I mean, we know that the field of hit's been there too. So it's really just about pitch recognition and approach and elevating more, all things that I think he can do as he gets more reps and experience. So at the end of the day, the most important thing is getting those ABs. He wasn't getting those last year in the big leagues. Every time he went back to AAA, it was light work for him. Now I think that's the key here is he's going to get plenty of ABs, and that defense isn't going to regress because he's not playing there. He'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Number 53, Heston Kjerstad, guy that we alluded to off the top here, but Baltimore Orioles outfield / first base prospect really should have over there because they had him playing a little bit of first base already. It makes sense because if he's going to get up there, that's probably where he could end up slotting in, or at least if you have him up there, you want him being able to play both. He's made one start at first and then 2 starts in right. That versatility is valuable. He's not going to be a great defender at either spot, but he's average at least. And I think it's always nice when you have a guy that's limited to corners to be able to play first and a corner outfield. But he swung it well already in AAA through the first few games. We know that he can put up great numbers in AAA, that he showed some good things in big league spring training. Again, I think a lot of other teams, he makes the ball club. He's another one of those examples, though, of why we talk plate discipline. because I think there's an above average hit tool here, or at the very least average. I do think that it ultimately settles in as like comfortably above average when it's all said and done, but he is very aggressive. And that aggression kind of takes him out of his field of hit sometimes. Ran a 35% chase rate last year. And then even in the early going, like big league spring training, he was aggressive again. That's a thing I really want to monitor because you have a good field of hit, you have above average power, but nothing is off the charts enough to where a bad approach can't undermine that. And that's where I'm keyed in on right now. And I think that's what's got to be the focus for him. It's easier to get away with being hyper aggressive in AAA because you make a bad swing and a bad pitch, give them a strike. They're less likely to put you away. Whereas in the big leagues, you give them a free strike. Odds are you're not going to, they're going to make you pay for that. You might not see another good pitch to hit the whole at bat, or a good pitch to hit the whole at bat. You only get 3 strikes, right? I think in AAA, it's a little bit easier to get away with that. And I'm interested to see how those chase rates and overall swing decisions trend as he continues to hit in a league where he can perform, whether he's doing that or not. And if there's a concerted effort to improve those swing decisions.
Yeah, he was the easiest one to justify having in Norfolk to open the year, I thought, because he has such a smaller sample of professional baseball work than a lot of the other guys. And Holiday's an exception because Kjerstad has more minor league experience than Jackson Holliday, understandably so. Frankly, not by that much. But Holiday's a unique beast where that the other is objectively worse than having Jackson Holliday at second base. Cowser, it was indefensible if they had him in the minor leagues. If they retained Ortiz, it would have been indefensible to have him in the minor leagues. And frankly, like Ramon Arias is playing third base and Kobe Mayo just hit a homer 111. I think it's getting close to indefensible to have Mayo in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
Norby, it's getting indefensible. Kjerstad is the exception to the rule with Baltimore, I feel like.
Yeah. And I think I love the point you bring up. Like, he's 25 years old. He just turned 25. But in terms of baseball experience, after missing 860 days or whatever it was, he's really 22, 23. And I think that's an important part of it too.
He hasn't played. It's also, I think, a big evaluation year for Mike Elias because, and this is why I like the proximity band, because I can play my favorite game, which is look at the big league roster and their contract situation and see where these guys could fit in. This is the evaluation year of Anthony Santander and Ryan O'Hearn. Ryan O'Hearn's 30 years old, club option at 7.5. If Kjerstad looks like he can handle first base, you decline 7.5 and just have Kjerstad play for the league minimum. The bigger question, I think, is do you pay Anthony Santander to return? Because if that is the case, then you've got a right field DH guy, and that's what Kjerstad would be.
I think the answer is no on both, and they should funnel all of that money to Corbin Burnes. But
I could see that. Yeah.
And again, I don't like operating under the assumption that all of these prospects are going to pan out, but you don't have to with the Orioles. You only need a few of them to pan out. And so these guys are all studs. They're not just like prospects. They're top prospects. And that's not even factoring in some of the guys outside of the top 100 or on the back end of the top 100 that we've talked about. And Bradfield, who should be up there relatively quickly. There's other guys that I think Dylan Beavers, who could be a breakout guy this year, that could really end up flying up the ranks and could be the next guy that we're like, oh my gosh, he's stuck in AAA with some of his tools that he has going for him. So yeah, this is a big year for Kjerstad, and I hope he doesn't, just kind of go into autopilot in AAA, because I don't blame him. I probably would too, because I think there needs to be some tangible differences in the approach to prove that can translate to the big league level. And I think that's what Ortiz was struggling with last year and why the Orioles were a little bit less incentivized to bring him up. And I think with Kjerstad, with the less defensive value, it's even more important for him to show, hey, I can draw these walks, I can work these counts, and what I'm doing is going to translate to big league success more so than maybe what I was doing last year.
Yeah.
Number 52, talk about proximity, guy that should be up quickly, especially if the Guardians are starved for a little bit more offense. Kyle Manzardo, traded from the Rays over to the Guardians in that Aaron Savali deal. Great get for the Guards, and a guy that you look across the board, it's 55 hit, it's 55 plate discipline, it's 55 power, and then 50 to 55 fielding ability at first base. It's just as safe and sound, I think, of an offensive profile as you're going to find. And what's been nice to see from Manzardo is there were some questions about how much power would be there, and that's an important question considering he's a first baseman. But I think he's starting to answer that plenty. He did through stronger EVs last year that did result in lower BABIP, which never happens, but because he was doing it with a sellout for more lift, and his launch angle, I think, was one of the loftier in the upper minors last year. Now I think he's kind of recalibrated to find that balance between the two. And in spring training, I really liked what I saw from him, and he was popping some gaudy EVs and hitting some balls really, really, really far and hard. The BP's a show. I think Stephen Kwan mentioned that on the Just Baseball show, but I think we're seeing him really lean into plus pull side power, and I think power that's going to even out to at least just above average in game. And then the hit tool has always been there. The approach has always been there. This guy's just a high probability big leaguer, and I think an above average bat. It's just a matter of where he fits in for these Guardians.
Yeah, he did go 0 for 4 with a punch out in his first game of the year, so I think I'm out on Kyle Manzardo. I think
maybe back down to Double-A.
Back down to Double-A, yes, but I also think he should probably go to the names that just missed on the top 100. It's a unique case because Josh Naylor's playing first base. I think at some point they need to bite the bullet, make Naylor a full-time first baseman, and just have Manzardo go. And they can eke out the extra year of service if he's up in 3 weeks. I don't know if that went into their decision. I don't want to pigeonhole the Guardians into saying, oh, yes, they are clearly manipulating, but he was a guy that was abundantly big league ready that I think they wanted to see like the change actually happen over the course of 3 weeks in AAA.
Yeah, I think you can get away with justifying this one a bit more also because of, and I'm not saying he's a better option, but they made the pick, like Davison De Los Santos being added to the fold there. Like that's another.
They returned him. Yeah.
They returned him. Yeah. But did they return him before the decision to send him to AAA?
No, I think they optioned him and then they returned De Los Santos, which feels like something should go in reverse order.
Yeah, it does. So maybe that was maybe not. Like, I don't know what their approach was there. I also don't know what that pick was. We talked about that when it happened. Like, what did you think was going to happen with a young, raw hitter that, is doesn't have much positional value? I thought he actually showed some good things, but, we're not here to talk De Los Santos. So, yeah, if they kind of knew that there was a high chance that they were going to return him, it makes even less sense. And the procedure maybe seems like that was why they did it. So talking heads like me justify it a little bit more. Right. But I will say, like, there doesn't need to be much more time with him in the minors. I do think that they have some things that they need to figure out with some of those guys that have been up there for a little bit and haven't quite translated, like an Arias, like a Freeman, some of those other dudes that have a bit more positional value to them. But now that you've returned De Los Santos, I think you have a couple weeks, maybe a month, to figure out what you've got with some of these guys that have been kind of roving around the bench, plugging into center field, trying to figure out who's going to be closer to that everyday guy. And if none of them really stand out, or you feel like you just haven't gotten a clear answer, I think Manzardo is going to be a clear answer of someone that can bolster your offense. And ultimately, I don't really know. He's one of those guys where you compare it to Kjerstad. Like, what do you really need to see from Manzardo? The only thing I could say is just consistently doing what we've seen him do in the past. There were some inconsistencies when, he was, again, selling out for a lift a little bit more, but I thought he kind of showed in the early parts and in the AFL, but in the early parts of spring training that, hey, this isn't a guy that's going to be selling out for a lift the same way. I think he was trying to make that adjustment to tap into more game power. Now he's recalibrated a bit more. And I think he's found that happy medium of not having a 22-degree launch angle and being still that well-rounded hitter that got him to where he is now. I think you could maybe make the case for breaking balls because last year sliders chewed him up a good bit. He hit 106 against sliders. So, I mean, that could be one thing that you key in on. Breaking balls overall, he hit $142. So if that's the thing that they want to see him improve upon, I get it. But let's see him do it in a month. And if he's hitting breaking balls better, like, let's get this guy up to the big leagues because he can crush fastballs and he can hit changeups well for a lefty. And I think that's usually enough for a guy to come up and make an impact.
Yeah.
Number 51, Brooks Lee, Minnesota Twins prospect who we're waiting for him to tell the Twins that he's ready. That's the quote we got from Falvey, right? Once he tells them he's ready.
Yes. We're also waiting for him to get healthy. This is the burden of the Minnesota Twins. You've got often injured Carlos Correa. You have Royce Lewis, who had a quad issue pop up on opening day. I think they said he could be out couple weeks.
Maybe a month.
Yeah, maybe a month. Brooks Lee, back spasms. AAA manager for the Twins, Toby Gardenhire, said he's out 3 to 4 weeks. He won't join the AAA team until the end of April. This sucks, and I feel for you, Twins fans.
Well, here's the problem. I mean, Royce Lewis, I get it. Like when you drafted him, you didn't know that there was going to be health issues, but now baked in, you do know the situation. Now you look at Buxton, like that's been a while where they've known that there's been injury issues there. When you look at the Correa signing, the only reason he's a Minnesota Twin is because of injury issues.
He got flagged twice.
Yeah. Yes. Brooks Lee, the only reason why he wasn't selected earlier was some concern with history of back issues, if I'm not mistaken. And then here we are. Again, it's not to say it's a bad pick. I think it was a great pick. I wanted the Marlins to take him, when they didn't. And I still think that he's going to be great. But it is always a little bit more concerning when the thing that was kind of flagged during the draft and during the draft process
becomes an
back spasms is one thing, but back spasms with a guy like Brooks Lee, who has a history of back issues, is why I think this has been more of, how often do you see a couple weeks for back spasms? I generally don't think you're going to see a couple week layoff for back spasms. I think it's because of his history. That said, when we've watched him, and that was a guy that we got to see up close and personal in spring breakout. I know you've seen him in AAA. It's one of the more efficient, especially from the left side. His right side's not as good, but it's fine. Again, it's like your right side just needs to be, if you're a switch hitter, better than the below average left on left guys, and he's better from that perspective. The left-handed swing, though, is as efficient and just compact and clean as they come. Can shoot it all over the field. If you miss inside, he has enough juice to sneak it out pull side. I think there's flashes of, average or better power to the pull side. But at the end of the day, it's hit over everything. There's enough power to give you doubles and 10 to 15 home runs. But the thing that I'm waiting on with him is the plate discipline, because you have the great hit tool, but you don't have a ton of power. He's an aggressive hitter. And then he's not, the speediest, and he's an average defender at short. I'd love to see him be a little bit more selective, because I think it's very unlikely that he taps into more impact. If he's a 10 to 15 home run guy and he's not walking, he's going to need to hit close to 300. If he can improve the selectivity a little bit, he can get away with it in 275, 280. Good walk rate, and then average defense at short, or move around the diamond and, just give you some value in a lot of different ways. And the intangibles are great there too. But that's kind of my thing with him, is like, there's so much pressure on the hit tool right now because the power is fringy. Seeing these back issues kind of come back up doesn't give me a lot of hope that the power is going to keep ticking up. And he doesn't look like a guy has much more to unlock there.
Yeah.
I think better approach could allow him to unlock it more, because he does have the ability to elevate, especially to the pull side. So if he can leverage his hitters counts better, put himself in better spots, I think that can level up everything, get that power to average, get that hit tool above plus, and get that OBP stronger. But at the end of the day, he is such a high probability big leaguer that he's, right on the fringe of top 50. But if he's a little bit lower for us than other people, and you're wondering why, it's kind of all of those reasons that we just hit on.
Yeah. He could be a 40 double guy. Don't you think so?
If it all works out, absolutely. Like, I think that's kind of what you're dreaming on, is, hey, you can just split the gaps with the best of them, drive it to both fields, a lot of singles, and then some, I know he's not the fastest, but he's that like hustle double out of the box. Yeah. I do think he could be a big double guy.
Yeah. I wonder if that is all-star capability type player. And I don't think it is, which is probably why he's outside the top 50. Like, 51 screams, really good big leaguer, not an all-star. And I think that's probably what you close your eyes and see with Royce Lewis. Or with Brooks Lee, pardon.
With Brooks Lee. Yeah, Royce was the opposite,
Royce is like MVP. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing, is like, in this range, you can get guys that are super talented, might flame out in double A, or you get the high probability big leaguer, but, maybe makes an all-star game or two. Maybe. And I think that's more where Brooks Lee is. And then the health kind of, just weighed him down a little bit more. Yeah. But I still think a great player, great prospect, and is going to be up with the Twins and serve a role for them immediately. And the floor is pretty much utility guy immediately. Like the big league floor at the very least is solid big league utility guy, but I think he's an everyday player and a pretty good one.
Yeah.
We're going to get into the top 50 in a moment, which starts with Andy Pages. But before that, one more quick break. All right. Andy Pages, number 50, Los Angeles Dodgers. What a spring he had. And before, and this is one of those names that you could say, oh, well, the spring training, give him a bump. Honestly, not really. If you look at where we had him prior to going down with the injury, going into 2023 and in the early parts of 2023, he's always hovered around the 70 to 45 range for us. In our top prospect lists, midseason updates, it's kind of oscillating anywhere from there. Of course, being hurt for the whole year last year when he tore his shoulder caused him to get surpassed by other guys. But Pages has always been a top 100 guy for us, and a guy that you and I have been talking about since you saw him in Fort Wayne. When he visited, and I mean, when I got to Arizona in 22, and I was able to kind of just stand right at the turtle there and watch that BP just up close and personal, see the way he moves, see how just repetitive and simple it is, but how he's able to just create this path that is geared for backspin and lift. A guy that may not put up the highest EVs, he'll flash them, but a guy that's always going to slug to the pull side. We talk about those guys like Isaac Paredes and things like that. Pages has more raw power than a lot of those outslug the EV guys, but then also is built from that template of I'm always going to get carry on my fly balls, and I'm just always going to hit more home runs than maybe the systems project me to. And that's because of the angles I create and the backspin I create. And if you look at what he's done year over year, I think that backs it up. And now that he's gotten healthy and he's a little bit more physical, now we're seeing the EVs tick up. But this guy's been one of the younger players at each stop, put up great numbers at each stop. I remember being specific, and we talked about it on the show, specifically shocked that after he got the bump to AA, it was right where how old was he? Do you have his numbers up there in front of you?
I think he was 21 when he got the bump to AA. I'm pulling it up.
I thought he was 20. I don't want to open a Fangraphs tab because I don't want this show to freeze out. But yeah. I if I'm not mistaken, he was 20.
He was 21.
Okay, you got it. Point Jack.
He spent the entire year in AA.
So he gets up to AA as a 21-year-old and puts up matches the offensive numbers pretty much for the most part. Obviously a little bit more hitter friendly, so the WRC plus takes a hit, but matches his home run output. What was it that year? 25?
It was 31 in 2021 in high A. He had 26 in 2022 in AA.
I mean, that's pretty damn good. Gets pretty close to the home run total there, puts up good numbers across the board. And because it was slightly, I guess, deflated from a WRC plus perspective in a hitter-friendly league, we saw him slip. And I think it was the strikeout rate that he actually matched to a T, and the walk rate being pretty much close to the same, if not slightly better. It's okay, so you just saw a young hitter make the jump from high A to AA, close to match his power numbers and match the strikeout rate and walk rate. Why would that be a guy that slips? That was one I just didn't totally understand. How a guy like that could slip.
So I think what you probably, if I tried to play devil's advocate here and it's here's why he slipped. He hit 265 with 31 homers. And you mentioned the walk rate and the K rate were relatively the same, but the OBP was lower, the OPS was lower because the batting average was lower. He went from a 265 guy with 30 to a 236 guy with 26 in a hitter-friendly environment, in a more hitter-friendly environment than you have in Midland, Michigan. So I think if you see a guy that is a good right fielder that can hit 270 with 30, that's a guy that's a consensus top 50 prospect in baseball. But if you start to view Andy Pages as a guy that's going to hit 230 and not 270, that may start to drop him down. I do think he's more of the 260, 270 guy than he is the 230 guy.
No, fair enough. And honestly, I think I remembered those numbers being a little bit stronger in AA. But still, then a younger guy who maintains a strikeout rate under 30%, impressive. And then he goes to the AFL, and in 23 games there, if you include some of the postseason games as well, 294, 388, 494 in that stretch. Elite contact rates, struck out 13.5% of the time, walked 9% of the time. So really strong showing in the AFL. And then in 2023, gets that second little taste of AA before they promote him to triple, where in his first game is where he ends up getting hurt. He parlayed that AFL momentum with a monster start to the Double-A season for him. That's why they quickly bumped him up. And what was it, like 50, 55 games in double there roughly? He ends up just mashing to a 272, 434, 464 slash line and gets that bump up to AAA, where he unfortunately, hurts himself really early on. But when you see those kind of numbers, you see that chase rate drop below 20%. Now he's walking through that stretch at like an 18% clip. Strikeout rate sticks in the low 20s, and he's driving the ball all over. Like, he wasn't even slugging the way we're used to seeing him slug, but hitting a ton of doubles. And in terms from a home run perspective, hitting a ton of doubles, walking, and looking more contact oriented. You knew that the power was going to come back and continue to grow as he gets used to and like kind of calibrated against more challenging pitching. And then he goes down. And then we see him in spring training healthy this year. The slug was there. That field of hit that started to break through before the injury was there. And he put up some monster numbers in spring.
If there is anybody that I'm buying stock in their spring training, aside from Chase DeLauder, it's Andy Pages. I'm buying stock in that guy being healthy again and seeing big league pitching like he did for that month in Arizona. I think this guy is awesome. And I think one of the most important numbers, obviously the 60 plate discipline is a very important number. The 60 game power is a very important number. I think 55 field is a very important number when you were trying to contextualize the value of Andy Pages, because we're talking about the bat. You should be excited about the bat. The bat is what got the Twitter clips and all that jazz. He is very Jock Peterson-esque when Jock was making his way up with the Dodgers, because yes, Jock was a masher that looked like he could hit 40 at the big league level. And that's why he was a top 20 prospect in baseball at the time, or like top 30, I think. Where did Jock kind of cap out at?
I don't even remember. He was up there. He was up there. And people loved the bat. But the other thing that boosted Jock's value was you knew he was going to be a great defender in right field. I think Andy Pages could be a really good defender in right field. They've got Jason Hayward on a 1-year, $9 million deal. Pages, I think, would be the perfect platoon because the Dodgers don't want Hayward seeing left-handed pitching. But if they're waiting for an everyday spot to open up, that's not a guy they're going to re-sign next year. Pages is going to have an everyday corner outfield job next year, and you're going to be very happy with the defense you get in center from Outman and right from Pages. I'm with you. And the last thing I'll put in here on Pages is his floor is like lefty masher with good defense in a corner.
His floor is like Randall Grichuk in a corner.
Yeah. And like the good version. He in 2022 had a 1,044 OPS against lefties. And again, that was a season where his stock kind of slipped a little bit. 1,044 OPS against lefties in 155 plate appearances if you combine the AFL. And then in his 34 plate appearances before the injury in 2023, he had a 1,025 OPS against lefties. So at the very least, he's going to demolish lefties. But I thought that even though the numbers weren't as good as I remembered in that younger bump to Double-A in 2022, still held his own pretty darn well for a guy who just kind of saw his prospect stock take a hit and then followed that up with a great showing in the AFL. So it was surprising to see him take that hit. And then we saw him start the way he started last year. If he didn't get hurt, probably would have had a monster year, could have potentially debuted last year. And instead gets hurt, comes back off that injury, has the spring we saw, hit the ball as hard as we saw him hit it, which was, again, more raw power than we had seen. 450-foot home run at 108 miles an hour off of Imanaga, a lefty, and just doing some other impressive things with that defense, with that arm. He could be a WAR accumulator in a corner. And I'm excited to see what he does. I think he's going to get up this year for the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Number 49, Victor Scott picked up not only his first big league hit yesterday for the Cardinals, but he picked up a backside double that I think was kind of what makes him a little bit more dynamic, I think, than he gets credit for. Is he going to hit for a ton of power? No, but he's capable of splitting a gap the other way. And that's all you need for a player like Victor Scott, who's plus hit, 80 run, 70 field and center, and above average plate discipline. Got off to a little bit of a slow start to his big league career because he made the jump from Double-A, and the plan wasn't really for him to debut this year. I mean, sorry, at the beginning of this year, like opening day, that wasn't the plan. They have Carlson, they had Edman. Edman had a bad setback, or just at least was not on the same timeline, so clearly wasn't going to be ready. And then Carlson collides with Jordan Walker, and both are not available. Surely they have Victor Scott, who at the very least can play great defense in center, be an elite base stealer and grind out at bats. Even if he doesn't get hits, he's going to see pitches. He's not going to just fold. It's not going to be like the Pete Crow Armstrong type of thing. And not that Pete was folding, but he was overpowered, overmatched. You're not going to get an overmatched Victor Scott as much. And I think we've seen that already, even in the at-bats where he wasn't picking up hits. I mean, this guy is just a gamer. We've seen it. And it's hard to bet against this guy. He may not make a ton of all-star games. He may not make any. I think he will ultimately sneak into a couple because of the speed and a hot start with the field to hit. But at the end of the day, if he's 275, 280, and he's walking at a slightly above average clip, he's playing elite defense in center field, and he's stealing bases with the best of them, which we know he can do, that probably is close to an all-star, and that's an above average everyday player at a premium position who does all the little things to help you win a ball game.
Hey, Aram, is he Esteury Ruiz?
What is that, by the way? Where did that come from? So I'm not like, we're not really tapped into these like prospect feuds on Twitter and whatever. And like, I guess there's like a take that gets thrown out and then people like go at each other and it becomes personal. I only find out about it because I see the same two players getting compared or like the same thing getting like brought up over and over and over again. I'm like, oh, this must be a topic. Well, you talked about it earlier, which was a hilarious coincidence about like how that's kind of the floor for Victor Scott.
Yeah.
Like if everything goes wrong, he's Esteury Ruiz. And then like, it had nothing to do with the argument that ends up being had on Twitter. Again, I have no idea where this comes from. And it's not nearly as bad to me as the I saw this prospect first thing that we see go on Twitter with like the I don't even know what you'd call that, like the prospect community, I guess. But man, like don't like if you're dying on a hill of comparing a player to a player, I already hate comps as it is. Like I like it to give you a baseline floor, ceiling, how they could impact the game could be similar to this player. But like dying on a hill of this guy is like this guy who's disappointed us, and like that's my example. Also, Ruiz is going to be a good player.
Yeah,
he's young. He broke out in his like last year in the minor leagues, and then like had to play in Oakland. Like he's going to get better. I we've already seen it. But no, to answer your question, no. Victor Scott's more dynamic. He's already doing more than Ruiz did at this stage of his career. He hits the ball harder, and he's a way better defender in center field, which is way more important in this profile. Like we're going to just look at numbers in the PCL and minor league stats. Also, minor league stats don't tell you everything. There's a lot more to it. I know that everybody doesn't have access to data. I get it. But if you're going to make definitive takes, you should probably try to have as much information as you have, if you could possibly have. And there's a lot of things that Victor Scott can do that Esteury Ruiz cannot. And the number one being the most important thing, elite defense in center field. And that is the most important aspect of this kind of profile, as is a plus hit tool, which Ruiz is closer to above average than I think plus, which gives Victor Scott a full year in the PCL, and you wouldn't be comparing those numbers.
I think the genesis of the claim when comparing those two guys was less of an indictment on Victor Scott and more buying low on Esteury Ruiz. It's like, hey, remember this guy's really good. And like, yeah, he is, but Scott is objectively better when you look at really any data point that you can access. And frankly, like, just look at what he did in AA. Like, this guy leveled up, man.
Watch the swing.
Yeah, watch the swing. But I mean, like 308 plate appearances in high A. Guy hit 280. Okay. Esteury, like that was kind of his jam too. He had an out-of-body experience in the minor leagues, but Victor Scott, 310 plate appearances in AA. He hit 323, and it felt really real. It felt like a thing that can happen. And was he slapping the ball around? Yeah. Like, was he hitting the ball for impact? Yes, he was. He had 7 homers. Call it the Texas League all you want, but this guy was doubling. He was hitting homers, and he was swiping 1 billion bags when he would get on base. I think the defense is the biggest point that you make that I really want to hammer home, because Esteury had like some gaffes in center field last year in Oakland. That doesn't happen with Victor Scott. He's a better option. If you gave me the choice between Esteury Ruiz at this time last year and Victor Scott right now, I'm choosing this guy 10 times out of 10.
And, you know, Esteury was not making the jump from double. He didn't really have things click for him fully until, you know, you got to double and triple. Like, here's the biggest thing too. The thing with Victor Scott, and I think the thing that sometimes can get a little bit lost is there's a lot of context. I understand that, like, you can't watch every player, every at bat and whatever. And that's part of it that makes it hard. But there's things that go into, I think, guys' numbers shifting, and you got to look at what maybe preceded that. And Victor Scott made a tangible swing adjustment, like a tangible setup change, something that, and he talked about it when he came on the show about, I asked him, I was like, from this date onward, you started with this setup. And then all of a sudden your contact rates went up, your EVs went up, and, your plate discipline was actually better. And he talked about just a subtle adjustment to where he's starting his hands and being a little bit more stacked on his backside and letting his natural athleticism and just feel for the barrel shine through. Whereas before he felt like his body was taking him out of it. You have that for context. And then you have numbers that are way better after he makes that change. His own contact rate over 90% or right around 90% after he makes that change. More power after he makes that change. Sometimes we got to dive a little bit deeper than just the surface level minor league stats. And I think Victor Scott's adjustments and numbers after the adjustments really, really hit that home. That said, I think Ruiz is a great player. I think he's going to be a really solid player. But yeah, I don't like the take wars of comparing players to players and dying on that hill. And I again, it becomes less about the players and I think more about the people making the case about the players. Yeah, but 48, Mick Abel. Phillies right-handed pitching prospect too. I mean, this is Jack, because I would have had him lower. I'll be honest. And then Jack kept encouraging me to watch more and watch more because last year, dude, he frustrated the hell out of me. Not only the command,
the hell out of me, man. Like he
throws, he throws hard, but the fastball shape was not good last year, and the command was not good last year. And you're like, watch what he did in spring training, man. Like it looks a little different. Like look at what he did to Juan Soto, and you see like Juan Soto take swings like that. You're like, okay, there's something that has to be tangibly different with this fastball because I didn't see AA hitters taking swings like that a lot of the time last year. Go look at it. A lot of differences with the fastball. And I'm excited to see, how that plays over a larger sample. But it was clear as day that his fastball would flirt with the dead zone a little bit. Mm-hmm. He was clearly getting more ride. And it was a true four-seamer now. And with Abel, he was able to get away with flirting with the dead zone more because of just how hard he throws and some of the angles that he can create. But now, staying on top of the ball more, getting that true ride, he was overpowering hitters, even big leaguers, with that fastball. And then I think that allowed everything else to play up off of it. The curveball, the slider, both pretty gross. And then he's mixed in some changeups as well that have looked better. It's still going to be a matter of the command, but I mean, just diving into some of the slight differences we've seen in the early going of 24, this might be the year where it comes together for the 22-year-old who feels like he's been around a lot longer than I think he has.
A race car is only as good as its engine. And the engine for Mick Abel is the fastball. And it is how the fastball performs, fastball command, fastball shape, fastball velo. Everything got better with Mick Abel. At least it looks like it in spring training, and we'll see what he looks like as we get forward in the minor league season. But the reason I say that is because, like the really impressive chassis is the curveball and like everything else that goes into performance on a racetrack is like all fluff, but it's the engine that wins races. It is the fastball that is going to get Mick Abel to the big leagues because of everything working off the fastball the way it does. Curveball, fastball guys, fastball, curveball guys, they need a great fastball to level up their curveball. And if Mick Abel's fastball looks like this, his curveball is going to achieve that 65 future value you have on it. Hell, that changeup probably levels up to that 60 future value that you have on it. Everything works off of the fastball. So Mick Abel's fastball looking as good as it did, I feel like unlocked a new world of what he can become in 2024. Not, hey, dream on this because he's really young and he's really athletic and he flashes this. If that fastball is a reality, everything else can quickly become a reality. And he could be a guy that, with Painter out until midseason, becomes the one that Dave Dombrowski turns to, Rob Thompson turns to, if Christopher Sanchez comes back down to earth or if somebody gets dinged up. Like Mick could be the guy at the end of the year if the fastball carries him there.
And it might help the command because he'll have a little bit more in zone confidence when it's getting on guys way faster. He was a little bit lower before in terms of like higher 3/4. Now he's brought it up a little bit. And again, I think that's helped him kill more horizontal. Need to see over a larger sample size, but even just in the spring training sample we have and whenever else we're able to get data of him throwing, he killed like more than 5 inches of horizontal and also gained 0.3 feet of extension, which can definitely help when you're throwing the ball hard. So that ride is really accentuated. And then I think that's also helping him stay on top of the breaking balls more and more of the true downward break on the curveball that now is getting another inch of vertical drop and less horizontal as well. So it's not blending with the slider as much. So he's separating these breaking balls. And then the changeup has looked good for him. So I'm really excited to see how those adjustments can continue to look as we extrapolate, over a larger sample size. Number 47, Kyle Harrison. He's pretty much graduated now. By the time this has pretty much gone out, it's enough innings now for Harrison to graduate, and he won't be on the next update. But San Francisco Giants prospect who showed some good things last year, some inconsistencies as well. The stuff backed up a little bit for me, and that was why he slipped some for us compared to maybe some others out there. Just a slightly different shape to his slider, and that preceded, I think, a lot less whiff and a lot more struggles with it, which made me concerned. And then even so far in big league spring training this year and his first outing in the big leagues this year, he was really good. But again, that slider just not quite as good as it was at points in the minor leagues from a shape perspective and just from a statistical perspective. Same with the changeup. So both secondaries back up a little bit, but the fastball just continues to be a 70 pitch. And when you have a fastball from that angle that hitters just cannot seem to dial up, like they just cannot get to it because of how unique the release is, he can have a ton of success with that. And that's what we saw. I mean, in his first big league start of the year, what percent do you think the fastball usage was, Jack, if you don't have it in front of you?
I don't have it in front of me. Man.
76 pitches. What percent of them do you think were fastballs?
Yeah, 60?
72%.
Oh my gosh.
I understand the fastball is incredibly unique,
Yeah, but
and it will be really good. And again, he had a good start based off of that. He did give up 2 home runs. He is in the right ballpark ultimately, though, to get away with that as well in San Francisco. But the reason why he fell for us is that secondary backup a little bit that we saw at the end of last year. And I have it kind of detailed in the write-ups of some of the things that I saw that changed and some of the reasons why I am a little bit concerned about the secondaries, because right now you got a 70 fastball. The slider is the only pitch that flashes above average for me at this point. And then he's got a cutter and a changeup that you're hoping will be average, and then command that's fringy. A lot of fastball reliance here, but the fastball is so good that he's going to be a big leaguer and a valuable one way or another. And I think even then now it's still good enough to be a 5 and dive guy with the secondaries being just good enough. But at one point, I thought we were looking at a guy that could be a frontline dude because the changeup was flashing above average and the slider was looking plus or maybe even better. Just seems like that's all backed up on him a little bit, and I'm not quite sure why.
I don't know. It's bizarre. You cannot get away with a 72% fastball usage. And even if it ticks down to 65%, you can't be a frontline guy using your fastball 67% of the time, 2/3 of the time, unless your name is Spencer Strider. And his fastball,
and even he added a curveball.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, Harrison's fastball is good. It's not Strider's. Let's get that out of the way right now. So you see 70 on it. Strider's is an 80. The only way that a starting pitcher gets away with 65 to 70% fastball usage is if it's an 80, and he can't do that.
Yeah. Or if you have, then that's the thing. Then the slider has to come along. And then if the slider comes along, you're going to chip away at that fastball usage. So that's where we're at here. Again, a lot can change. He's still so young. But at this point, it's hard to project him as anything more than, a volatile middle rotation arm or a back end arm. And ultimately could be a Josh Hader type. If they end up going that route down the line, I think that he's good enough to stick in a rotation and be that volatile 4 that gives you flashes of a really good 3 and flashes of is he going to give us 3-4 innings today? And that's still valuable in today's game, and it could be really fun to see what he develops into because he is still very young.
You still got Ryan Walker to piggyback off of him.
Exactly. That guy's going to throw 1,000 innings this year.
Right.
46. Mariners prospect Colt Emerson. Shortstop for now, could move to third base. One of the better pro debuts we saw last year, and we've seen from a high schooler in a while, outside of the obvious. But Emerson put up great numbers as one of the younger guys in the class. Blends a good feel to hit with above average power potential, decent speed. I think the defense is I think he has a shot to stick it short, maybe a little bit more than people give him credit for. But as he thickens out a little bit more, he already put on 15 pounds. I think third base ultimately makes the most sense, where it could be an above average defender there. The numbers were great. He flashed really good EVs. He's going to need to find that lower half a little bit more. He's definitely a bit of a drifter, but because his hands are so quick, because the path is already so good, he was able to get away with that. Similar to the Merrill thing we were talking about, where he's just that drift's making it hard for him to pull with authority right now. And for him to tap into all of his power, which could be above average game power, he's going to need to, be on the backside more and be able to create leverage pull side. It's so early for him. Already hitting the ball as hard as he was the other way, already showing a good approach, already posting great contact rates and the path being so good. Emerson's just a really fun player and just another example of a great Seattle Mariners draft pick.
I mean, shit, if he looks like a Mack truck, he's going to have to move to third base. And like he showed up to spring training kind of looking like a Mack truck. Lower half wise, he looked new. He looked like a 23, 24-year-old that spent 4 or 5 years in a major league strength program. That was crazy. What do you think the best version of his offensive output looks like? Is it a guy that can hit 290, 300? Or is it a guy that, may move to third base, may commit to power and like, hey, could be a 30 homer third baseman?
I kind of think like a hybrid between the two. I think he's what all comes together could be a 280, 290 guy, 20 to 25 home runs and walks at third base. That still plays. You don't need, you don't need to hit 30 to play third if you're hitting well and you're walking. So that's kind of where I see him settling in, is that pretty high batting average. I think hit tool is probably the leading tool, but 20 to 25 homers, walks, and plays good defense at third. It's a pretty darn good player.
It sounds like what we wanted from Alec Bohm, and it never really came about. But like, it is something that I think everybody really wanted from him, where you saw a good pure hitter and, big body. And Emerson is not as like physically God gifted like Alec Bohm is. Bohm is cut from the Chris Bryant cloth, where like he's 6'4" and he's long, but he controls his limbs well. Emerson can be more of that tank type, that more of like Matt Chapman build at third base, where it's just like, you look like a ball player, man. Like you fit the prototype of third baseman.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe he gets a shot to stick it short. That obviously would help the profile or just, elevate the profile some, but I still think the same of him as, a top 50 prospect if you feel pretty confident that he's going to move to third, because I think the power is going to continue to tick up and that field to hit is already there. The plate discipline is already pretty good for his age. And there's just a lot to like as one of the younger guys in that class.
Yeah.
45, recent guest to the show. If you haven't checked it out, check out that interview with Dylan Lesko, right-handed pitching prospect of the San Diego Padres we put out a couple weeks ago. I am so pumped to watch this guy throw this year, especially after talking to him and hearing him talk about, being 2 years removed, how he felt like he 2 years removed from Tommy John. He felt like when he came back at the end of last year that he was all the way back, and he showed some things that were good, but the command was a little inconsistent. And then he was like, hey, everyone told me 2 years, is usually when you feel like yourself again, but I didn't really believe it. And then now I'm at the 2-year mark and I feel like a different person. Like I feel like a better version of what I felt like before TJ. And he was a guy that got a lot of earned high marks for his delivery. It was viewed as one of the most advanced high school deliveries in a couple years, at least. And he filled up the zone. And then as so many pitchers see happen coming off of TJ, the command was inconsistent. We're talking about a guy that averages over 20 inches of vert, has a plus changeup, a slider that can be above average. It just was so inconsistent for him coming off of the TJ and being a pronator. Like, I think it's just going to take a little bit longer for that supination to come. But he was really excited about, or I should say the curveball is that 3,000 RPM pitch that, was inconsistent for him. But he's really excited about the slider he added that he told us about. And he feels like it could be that velocity bridge to help his curveball be more consistent as well. So he's really confident in the slider. He feels like it's going to give him a complete 4-pitch mix. And I do understand why he's saying that, right? The fastball, when you throw hard like that, it's your hardest throw. Changeup, it's usually your hardest throw, and the grip takes care of it. Then the curveball, it's a totally different grip. You're throwing it totally different. And I think that was really hard for him. So now you have a slider, which is like in between there of the types of throws. And I think it's going to help, like he said, bridge that gap. I understand why he said that. And if that's the case, look out, because you got 2+ pitches, and then whatever those breaking balls turn into, and command that I'm expecting to tick up here for the Padres' first-round pick in 2022.
Do you think he can climb quickly? I'm thinking about him in comparison to what's happening with Robbie Snelling. And I do think that Snelling, assuming full health, has a shot to be in the big leagues by year's end. And this was a guy that was in low A to begin last year, but he went from low A to high A to double. Lesko, I think his output is going to be limited because he is, entering his first full season of professional baseball. I don't see a world where he really gets over um, what Cade Horton got. Like Cade Horton, I think was what, 88 innings last year. I
Yeah.
think that's probably the number that Lesko is capped at.
Yeah.
But I could see him spending, the first 2 months, 3 months of the season in Fort Wayne, and then he goes to San Antonio for 2 months and then shuts down on September 1.
I could see that. And I'm going to be interested to see how they manage his innings and everything. But I thought overall, like there was inconsistencies from the command perspective, but you saw some really good things from that pro debut, and especially down the stretch where all of a sudden, as he started to feel a little bit more like himself, that fastball started averaging even more ride. That changeup started to look even more gross. And again, we know that as a pronator, the fact that he can get 3,000 RPM on the breaking ball is pretty crazy. It shows you what he can do, the other way as well, and kind of rip some balls as well as a supinator. So I'm extremely eager to see how it all looks because I do really buy into him feeling better, his command getting back to where it was pre-draft, and that slider potentially being that difference maker to not only give him a third pitch that might be better than the curveball, but also help the curveball as well. Lesko could climb pretty quick and then be poised for a big league debut, maybe as soon as 2025, depending on how many innings they let him go this year.
We'll see. He'll be thrown to Ethan Salas in Fort Wayne. We know that.
That's going to be one of the top teams we talk about this coming week of just some of the minor league teams that are the most loaded and we're most excited about.
Yep.
Jared Jones, we talked about off the top in that. If you're watching on YouTube, it's a separate video. It's the video we talked about just minor league opening day, AAA opening weekend, takeaways. Jones, you can make it a little bit quicker. He looked as advertised in his big league debut. It's a 70 fastball, 60 slider. The changeup is that big question as the third pitch that is flashed average. It looked average in his big league debut. He threw all five for strikes, as we mentioned earlier, and then he'll sprinkle in that taste-breaking curveball here and there. Like we're talking about what makes maybe him better than Kyle Harrison at this point. I think it's the fact that the fastball is pretty comparable, if not like right there. The slider is better. The command seems to be a little bit better. And then, Harrison might have a slight edge on the changeup, but Jones is already tracking that way where it looks pretty darn good. And I just love the athleticism that Jones brings on the mound as well. That big league debut was special.
We're officially the high guys on Jared Jones. He's not on Prospectus's top 100, 74 on BA, 62 on Pipeline. Listen, if you have not joined the hype train yet, shoot us a DM and let us know that you're on the hype train because that thing is like very close to leaving the station. I think a lot of people might be on the final boarding call, which was this past weekend. But man, like the way, and I think you got a glimpse of it in Miami, but I do think you're going to see it a little bit more in a home start. He is very Stroman-esque in the way that he rides energy. Like I think he's going to feed off of energy, and he's going to be one of those that is a fun, exhilarating watch as a starting pitcher.
He's fiery.
It's fiery. It's very, very fiery. It's very, very competitive, and it comes from a good place, and it's exciting. And like the best pitchers in baseball typically are not exciting. It's like, oh, cruise control, Cole's through 7 again. This is going to be a fun, oh, he's through 7 again.
He's electrifying. Like, it's just going to get you fired up just watching. I think the what his quote when they said, like, what's your goal for your big league debut? And he's just said, go shove. That's who he is. He's going to go right at you. He's going to attack, and he's angry out there. And I love it. It's fun. But when you have that 70 fastball and it's an easy 70 with the velo, with the shape, with the characteristics, that slider working off of it. If he can mix that changeup in even 5-10 times a start, it's going to be real tough to hit this guy, especially with the way that the command has been tracking for him.
GG's.
43, Dalton Rushing, another guy that we had on recently. Really fun conversation hearing about the way that he's been able to work with some of the Dodgers top pitchers during spring training, what he learned from that. And, just some of the takeaways from catching a Glass now, a Yamamoto, a Walker Buehler, all that good stuff. But Rushing rakes, and he has a great approach. It's one of the best plate discipline grades that we're going to have on here because it's not just patience. It's also good swing decisions, not passive at all. Average feel to hit at the very least, but then you have above average game power that I think he's going to continue to grow into as he elevates more. I think he grows into close to an average catcher, similar to Austin Wells. But I just think the offensive ability is better than Austin Wells. And I also think that the defensive ability could get to the point where it's slightly better than Austin Wells. But it's that similar left-handed hitter, above average power, pretty good feel to hit. And Wells historically drew walks. Now he doesn't as much. Rushing really, really does. I don't know what the situation is at the big league level, given that that Will Smith guy's locked up for 10 years now. But that's not how we base ranking prospects. And what I've seen from Dalton Rushing is a guy that can really swing it, has improved mightily at behind the dish, and gets on base with the best of them.
He's going to cost a pretty penny, man, in a trade if he is made available, considering Will Smith's contract situation now. I could see a world where he's not made available and they get Will Smith off of his knees 3 days a week and Rushing catches 3 days a week, and they are the catcher. I mean, there's not a DH spot open. There's not a first base spot open. Damn, they may have to trade him. We'll see what happens there. But like, I was just trying to think that through, and it's like, well, they have that Ohtani guy who's going to DH for the next 10 years too. Like, this is tough. Rushing is, I like the Wells comp. I will say Wells has some of that. You look at him and it's like, oh, that's country strength. Like that is, classic, like, arm hair, that kind of guy. Rushing is big man. I feel like we'll get even greater power than what you may have. Like his physique and a 55 game power don't really jive. I feel like he could blossom into a 60 game power type guy.
Very possible, especially as he, and he's just another guy that just really likes to hit hard line drives, but he elevates really well. So like, I do see him as someone that could end up growing into closer to that 30, home run power. Whereas right now, just going from the production, it'd be a big leap, but he's a guy that could make that big leap, to your point.
And I wonder if he tries to lean into that. It feels like he almost lacks an identity right now offensively. Like walking is his identity, but what do your batted balls look like? When you don't necessarily have, high level speed. He's a 45 runner. He's a fine runner, but like JT Realmuto will lift. JT was, 20 homers and 20 bags, that kind of guy. And he's not a stolen base guy at all. So I wonder if he leans into the homer thing or if he's like, you know what, I'm going to hit 40 doubles, that kind of thing.
No, I think it's really interesting to monitor too. And I think he ultimately does kind of lean into the power a bit more, especially because he's the 3 true outcome type of guy that I think is really valuable because he's not going to K a ton. So it wouldn't be as much of that 3 true outcome. But I also think it'll allow him to, he walked at near 20% clip last year, especially if you take away, he had an undiagnosed concussion or like a misdiagnosed. I think it was undiagnosed concussion. And he went through like a 0 for 26 stretch. And if you take away like the stretch of games to where he had that undiagnosed concussion that he was trying to hit through, he slashed 269, 434, 557 on the season. It's a 990 OPS, a 19% walk rate, a 24% K rate, a ground ball rate of 39%, 18 home runs in that span. To your point, that power could be closer to plus, especially when you look at that stretch of what he was slugging, how he was doing it. He also got hit by 12 pitches. So he just kind of stands on the plate. It's like, I'm going to crush pitches that I get a chance to crush. And if you hit me trying to beat me inside, that's fine. If you leave it over the plate, I'm going to also crush it. So he just seems like a type of guy that I agree could lean into that power more. Maybe the average takes a little bit of a hit, but he's extremely productive.
Yeah.
42. Oh, guy that we got to see up close and personal as well and put on as good of a display as I've seen from any prospect in a while in person. Xavier Isaac, first base prospect, Tampa Bay Rays. Dude, we've talked about him so much on the show. We talked about him a bunch after our takeaways from that spring breakout. I mean, the power continues to tick up as he matures physically, right? He was drafted as a pretty big guy. He's converted a lot of that weight into strength and muscle, and now he's more agile. It's a feel to hit that has continued to improve. It's power that could be plus game power, like we're talking 40 homers, and good swing decisions. The bat speed's impressive. It's all fields. We saw a backside double. We saw a backside homer. We saw a home run to dead center. I've seen him pull home runs on balls that look like they're going to hit him, and he somehow one hand swings it and keeps it fair. This is a rare field to hit from a guy with as much power and who is as big as he is. Xavier Isaac is one of the best power hitting prospects in baseball. A lot of the reasons why I love Owen Casey, I love Xavier Isaac. So do with that what you will.
Yeah, I wonder where he goes because he went to high A for what 12 games and he had 6 homers. I I wonder what happens here. And he hasn't been announced as going to double A or high A. I think they could realistically put that guy in double A, and I think he would thrive in double A.
I do wonder the same thing. And I don't know if I almost want them to, because I mean, what is he going to just destroy high A and then you're going to bump him up anyways? Maybe they do that for a couple weeks, but I agree. I think he can kind of jump high A a little bit, especially with the performance we saw this spring, and kind of fast track him a little bit more.
Yeah.
Especially with Manzardo out of the way too. So
yeah,
I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that double A assignment, or if not, a quick bump to double.
And like, listen, if Caminero hit the ground running like that, I don't think he's Junior Caminero by any stretch. Don't get it twisted. But why can't he produce at a level that isn't an 1,000 OPS but a 900 OPS? Do you want to see a 1,000 OPS in high A, or do you want to see a 900 in double A for a guy this young?
And just more reps there for him to maybe, like, if there is a little bit of an acclimation process, okay, start it earlier and get him rolling there, and he can play the whole season there. I think that's a no-brainer. We'll see where they start him. If they start him in high A, I think he's going to make quick work of the competition there. But I like the idea of him in double A too. Guy with the big league team. Last one that we'll talk about here, Curtis Mead, third base prospect with the Tampa Bay Rays, second base as well. Mead, we were hoping to see get enough big league action this year, and I think he'll get a fair amount. It's another guy that I think is a victim of prospect fatigue, because he didn't quite have the year that everybody was expecting last year after a monster, one of the best hitters in the minor leagues in 2022. But the thing is, he comes back from injury and was one of the better hitters in the upper minors. And then gets up to the big leagues, and it was a little bit of a struggle, like so many young hitters, struggle up there. Mead is really damn good. It's a really good field to hit. It is plus raw power, and this is the difference with the game power, and raw power. He's probably one of those examples where it would be nice to have the raw power grade, but there's just less of those guys than I think there are the plate discipline guys. It's important to show those two things. But with Mead, hits the ball really hard. It's just at a very flat angle, which is fine. I think if it all works out, he's a 40 doubles guy. He's still going to hit enough home runs. He still catches breaking balls out front and lifts them. Through spring training, he was elevating more. And I think that's been a focus for him is to elevate a bit more. But regardless, he's going to make a lot of contact. He's going to walk a decent clip. He's not going to strike out a ton, and he's going to hit the ball really hard. There's not a lot of positional value. His arm, he did work hard on his arm in the offseason, and I think that's going to help him a lot, to be a passable third baseman. Ultimately, I think his best spot's probably, that Edouard Julien type of second base, where he might be a little bit better. But it's all about the bat here, and the bat is damn good.
That's what he's doing. He's played second base in each of his first 2 appearances in 2024. I would assume that he is displacing Brandon Lau more than he's displacing Isaac Paredes. When he got up, he played a lot of third base, understandably so. But I do think that they are seeing the same things that you are, and they're willing to take on that early Max Muncy second base thing. Remember, Max Muncy was a second baseman, and then he was a first baseman for a little bit. And now he's a third baseman, and it's like he's moved around over the course of his career. Could see Mead move around over the course of his career, and he's going to be the 30-year-old that works on defense. Like Muncy, you said, defense has been a focal point for him. But I do see a world where he is that quote unquote below average defensive second baseman, where you could have guys that are smoother there. Like, hey, if you want to give the reps to Taylor Walls, go ahead. But wouldn't you rather have this guy's bat in the lineup? I think that could be the situation that you run into in Tampa.
Especially with Aranda hurt. And the other thing with him is lefty masher, 2022, 386, 427, 687 slash line against lefties. 2023, less slug, but still really good numbers against lefties. 309, 393, 500 slash line against lefties. So another guy at the very least is going to fill in and spell lefties and can do it really well. His righties just fine too. But in terms of his big league role right now, that seems like a really good floor for him. But I think he's a well-rounded hitter. Like you mentioned, that the defense is always going to be the work in progress, but the bat is always what ends up making him an everyday player.
I haven't
mega episode here because sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't seen anything said specifically from Kevin Cash about like a platoon, but him and a Brandon Lau platoon makes a ton of sense because Lau's OPS drops like 140 points against left-handed pitching.
Exactly. And then maybe you get him some reps at first base and from time to time. I know they got Yandy there, but they can maybe move around, move and shake. We'll see if maybe he fills in a DH. They get creative. Kevin Cash, and we know the front office is very good at that, but Mead seems to fill a role that they kind of need with some of the guys that they have that are left-handed, hitters that really are best against righties. That's it for this mega episode. We figured we had to go long on this one because we had to talk about, the AAA opener, and there's already going to be 4 episodes this week anyways. Yeah. But thank you for hanging on with us for an hour and a half. If you're watching, or if you're listening on audio, if you're watching on YouTube, it's 2 separate videos. So we didn't steal you as long unless you knocked out both in one sitting. If you did, you're the best. Please subscribe to the YouTube if you haven't already. Leave a rating for the podcast if you don't mind. That would be awesome as well. And it's a new month, and it's finally minor league baseball season. So we're going to be putting out, literally right after this, I'm going to be putting out the bonus episode, breaking down Paul Skeens' start from a pitch-by-pitch data perspective, breaking down Jack Leiter, breaking down a lot of the things that stood out to me in this first minor league data heat sheet that we'll be doing on these bonus episodes of the call-up that you can subscribe to in the episode description. I really appreciate that support to help us continue to do really good things with the show, improve the production, and really keep growing it. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tagging along with us for all of it. And we look forward to continuing to fly through this top 100 with you throughout this week, finishing it up very soon, as well as the top minor league rosters to look out for later in the week as well. Look forward to talking to you tomorrow.